The bullet entered through the commander's office window at 0347 hours. Major General Richard Hartwell was working late at Fort Benning, Georgia, reviewing operational reports at his desk. The shot came from approximately 400 meters away through a sixth-floor window that should have been impossible to hit from ground level. The round struck Hartwell in the shoulder, non-fatal but precise. Whoever fired that shot knew exactly what they were doing. Base security locked down immediately. Every entrance sealed. Every soldier accounted for. The shooter was still on base. Had to be. Special Agent Sarah Chen from CID Criminal Investigation Command arrived within an hour. She was a 15-year veteran investigator, sharp, methodical, someone who'd solved dozens of cases across multiple military installations. She examined the entry point, the trajectory, the impact pattern. Then she retrieved the bullet that had lodged in the wall behind Hartwell's desk. It was a 7.62 millimeters NATO round, standard military issue, fired from an M24 Sniper Weapon System, the standard sniper rifle used by Army marksmen. The rifling marks on the bullet were clear, precise, exactly what you'd expect from that weapon platform. But something about this shot bothered Chen. The angle was perfect. The precision was exceptional. The timing, 0347 hours, when most of the base was asleep, showed planning. This wasn't random. This wasn't some disturbed soldier acting impulsively. This was professional, calculated, someone with training. Chen called the base commander. "Colonel Peterson, I need to know how many sniper-qualified soldiers are currently stationed at Fort Benning." "Let me check." A pause. "We have 127 soldiers with sniper qualification currently on base." Chen felt her stomach sink. 127 suspects, all with the training to make this shot, all with access to the same weapon system. "I need interviews with all of them, immediately." Over the next 18 hours, Chen and her team interrogated 43 of the 127 sniper-qualified soldiers. All had alibis. All denied involvement. All seemed genuinely shocked by the attack. But without more evidence, Chen was running out of leads. The bullet alone wasn't enough. The rifling marks could match any M24 on base, and there were over 200 of them in the armory. That's when Lieutenant Rodriguez, one of the base security officers, made a suggestion. "Ma'am, there's someone you should talk to. Staff Sergeant Jackson. He's been the range safety officer here for, I don't know, 25 years? Maybe more. If anyone knows the shooters on this base, it's him." Chen was skeptical. "What's a range officer going to tell me that ballistics can't?" "I don't know, ma'am. But people say Jackson has an unusual memory. Like, he remembers every soldier who's ever trained on his range. It might be worth a shot." Chen had investigated enough dead-end leads to know that sometimes the unlikely sources paid off. "Where can I find him?" "Range office, Building 43. Chen found Jackson at the rifle range, supervising a qualification course. He was 53 years old, average height, thin build, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like someone who'd spent decades behind a desk, managing paperwork and enforcing safety protocols. He did not look like someone who could solve a criminal investigation. "Staff Sergeant Jackson?" Chen approached, showing her CID credentials. "I'm Special Agent Chen. I need your help with an investigation." Jackson called for another NCO to take over the range, then walked with Chen to his office. A small room filled with filing cabinets, safety posters, and decades of accumulated paperwork. "How can I help, ma'am?" "We had a sniper attack last night. Major General Hartwell was shot through his office window. He survived, but the shooter is still at large. I have the recovered bullet, and I need to identify who fired it." Jackson's expression was grave. "That's serious, ma'am. How can I help?" "I was told you might be able to provide insight into the shooters on this base, their capabilities, their patterns." "I can try, ma'am. Show me what you have." Chen pulled out the evidence bag containing the recovered bullet. Jackson took it carefully, holding it up to the light, examining it with intense focus. He studied the rifling marks, the deformation pattern, the way the bullet had struck and fragmented slightly on impact. Then he did something Chen didn't expect. He pulled out a magnifying glass and examined the bullet even more closely, his eyes narrowing as he focused on details Chen couldn't even see. After a long minute, Jackson set down the magnifying glass and looked at Chen. This was fired by Private First Class David Miller. Chen blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Private Miller. He graduated from sniper school in 2019. Left-handed. Has a tendency to pull slightly right at distances over 350 meters. Approximately 2 centimeters of deviation at 400 meters. This bullet shows the exact signature of his shooting pattern. Chen felt her investigators' instincts kick into high alert. "Sergeant, how can you possibly know that from looking at a bullet?" Jackson met her eyes calmly. "Because I trained him, ma'am. I remember his shooting pattern. The way he compensates for his left-hand pull. The way he tends to overcorrect at distance. Every shooter has a signature, a unique pattern in how they aim, breathe, trigger, and compensate. I remember Private Miller's signature." Chen sat down slowly. "When did you train him?" 2019, 4 years ago. He qualified for sniper school through my advanced marksmanship course. 4 years ago. And you remember his exact shooting pattern?" "Yes, ma'am." Chen leaned forward. "Sergeant Jackson, I've interviewed 43 sniper-qualified soldiers in the past 18 hours. I need more than a hunch to arrest someone. How certain are you about this identification?" Jackson pulled out a worn notebook from his desk drawer. It was old, the pages yellowed, filled with years of handwritten entries. He flipped to a page dated March 2019. Private David Miller, March 12, 2019. Advanced Marksmanship Course. Left-handed. Initial grouping. 6 inches at 300 meters. Final qualification. Expert. 94 out of 100. Notable characteristics. Consistent right pull at distances over 350 meters, approximately 1.5 to 2.5 centimeters, depending on wind conditions. Excellent trigger control. Needs work on breathing under stress. Recommended for sniper school. Chen took the notebook and read the entry. The detail was extraordinary. Precise. Technical. "How many soldiers have you trained, Sergeant?" Jackson paused, as if calculating. "In 25 years? Approximately 40,000, ma'am." Chen felt reality tilt slightly. "You've trained 40,000 soldiers?" "Yes, ma'am. Give or take a few hundred." "And you remember this one specific private's shooting pattern from 4 years ago?" "I remember all of them, ma'am. Every soldier I've ever trained. Their patterns, their tendencies, their signatures. It's part of my job." Chen stared at him. "Sergeant, most instructors can barely remember the soldiers they trained last month. You're telling me you remember 40,000 people?" "Yes, ma'am. I have eidetic memory, photographic recall. It's just how my brain works. I see something once I remember it. A shooting pattern, a face, a conversation. It stays with me." Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Army Story so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Chen's mind raced. If Jackson was telling the truth, if he really could identify a shooter from a single bullet fired 4 years after training, this was the break she needed. But she had to verify. "Sergeant Jackson, I need more information on Private Miller. Anything that might indicate he's capable of this attack." Jackson flipped through his notebook to more recent pages. "I've kept informal notes on soldiers who showed concerning behavior. Miller came back to the range about 6 months ago. Wanted to requalify. I supervised his shoot. He found the entry. October 2023. Miller's performance had deteriorated. Grouping was erratic. He seemed distracted, angry. I tried to talk to him, but he was hostile. Mentioned something about command not caring about enlisted soldiers. About officers sitting in comfortable offices while soldiers did the real work. It concerned me. Did you report it?" I mentioned it to his platoon sergeant. "But Miller wasn't in my chain of command. I'm just the range officer. I didn't think it was my place to." He stopped, looking guilty. "Maybe I should have done more." Chen pulled out her phone. I need a full background check on Private First Class David Miller. Current assignment, recent behavior, any disciplinary actions, psychological evaluations. I want it in 10 minutes. The information came back quickly. Miller had been flagged by his platoon leader for behavioral issues, had made threatening comments about command staff, had submitted 3 requests for hardship discharge, all denied, had been seeing a mental health counselor, but had stopped attending sessions 2 months ago. Everything Jackson had said was checking out. Where is Miller's current assignment? Chen asked. 3rd Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment. Barracks, Building 7. Send a team. I want him in custody in the next 15 minutes. Approach with caution. He's armed, trained, and has already demonstrated willingness to attack command staff. The arrest team moved in. Private Miller was apprehended in his barracks room. He didn't resist. When CID searched his quarters, they found detailed notes about 3 general officer schedules, movement patterns, and office locations. Miller had been planning a serial assassination campaign. The attack on General Hartwell was supposed to be the first of 3. When confronted with Jackson's analysis, Miller went silent. Then, finally, he confessed. He'd been planning the attacks for months, had felt betrayed by command after his hardship discharge requests were denied, had decided to make them pay. Jackson's identification from a single bullet had stopped him before he could continue. But the case raised questions that went far beyond the investigation. Colonel Sarah Peterson called Jackson into her office the day after Miller's arrest. Sergeant Jackson, Agent Chen told me what you did. How you identified Miller from a single bullet. From 40,000 soldiers you've trained over 25 years. Jackson stood at attention. Yes, ma'am. Why has nobody known about this ability? Jackson looked uncomfortable. Nobody asked, ma'am. I just do my job. Train soldiers. Keep them safe. I thought remembering their shooting patterns was just part of being a good instructor. Peterson shook her head slowly. Sergeant, you don't understand. What you're describing, perfect recall of 40,000 people and their individual shooting signatures, that's not normal. That's extraordinary. She paused. That's a capability the Army should have been utilizing for decades. Ma'am, I'm just a range officer. No, Sergeant. You're an intelligence asset we never knew we had. You've been solving problems quietly for 25 years, and nobody recognized what you were doing. Peterson picked up her phone. I'm recommending you for the Soldier's Medal. You stopped a serial assassination plot. You saved lives. That deserves recognition. Ma'am, I was just doing my job. Your job is to run a rifle range, Sergeant. You went far beyond that. But the recognition didn't stop there. Word spread quickly through Fort Benning about what Jackson had done. Soldiers started coming to him, not just for training, but to thank him, to share stories. A sergeant first class who Jackson had trained 12 years ago. You remembered me. After all that time, you remembered my name, my shooting pattern, the exact adjustments you made to help me qualify. That meant everything to me. A captain who Jackson had trained in 2007. You told me I had potential. Nobody else saw it, but you remembered me, and that belief changed my life. One by one, soldiers who'd passed through Jackson's range over 25 years shared similar stories. He'd remembered them when they thought they were invisible, had seen their potential when others saw them as numbers, had made them feel valued in an institution so large that individual soldiers could feel forgotten. Jackson had been doing this quietly, without recognition, for a quarter century. He'd used his extraordinary memory not for personal gain or recognition, but to be a better instructor, to help soldiers succeed. 6 months later, a researcher from the Army Medical Research Institute came to Fort Benning to study Jackson's memory. They confirmed what Chen had suspected. Jackson had eidetic memory so precise that he could recall visual and spatial information with perfect accuracy even decades later. This is one of the most remarkable cases of photographic memory I've ever documented, the researcher said. Most people claiming eidetic memory have good recall, but not perfect. Sergeant Jackson is different. He remembers everything. Faces, patterns, conversations, dates. with complete accuracy. The Army started using Jackson differently. He became a consultant for CID investigations. When ballistics evidence was inconclusive, Jackson could often identify shooters based on shooting patterns. When soldiers went missing, Jackson could remember their habits, their skills, their tendencies in ways that helped search teams. He solved 3 more criminal cases over the next year, each time using his extraordinary memory to connect patterns that nobody else could see. But despite the recognition, Jackson remained humble. He kept his worn notebook, kept his routine, kept training soldiers on the rifle range. Because to him, that's what mattered. Not the awards or the recognition, but the soldiers. The 40,000 individual people he'd trained over 25 years. When Jackson finally retired in 2025, the ceremony was unprecedented. Over 800 soldiers returned to Fort Benning from across the country, from different bases, different units, different eras. They came because Jackson had remembered them, and they wanted him to know he wasn't forgotten. Colonel Peterson stood at the podium, looking at the massive crowd. Staff Sergeant Marcus Jackson has served for 28 years. For 25 of those years, he was the range safety officer at Fort Benning. In that time, he trained approximately 40,000 soldiers. She paused, letting that number sink in. But this retirement isn't about numbers. It's about the fact that Sergeant Jackson remembered every single one of those soldiers. Their names, their faces, their shooting patterns, their potential. Peterson gestured to the crowd. 800 soldiers are here today because Sergeant Jackson made them feel seen, made them feel valued, made them feel remembered. In an institution as large as the military, where people can feel invisible, Marcus Jackson proved that every person matters enough to remember. She turned to Jackson. "Sergeant, you stopped a serial assassination plot by identifying a shooter from a single bullet fired for years after you trained him. You used your extraordinary memory not for personal gain, but to protect soldiers, to help them succeed, to make sure they weren't forgotten." The crowd rose to its feet, 800 soldiers saluting the man who'd remembered them.